Valued members of the Collateral Highway community, we're delighted to be able to welcome today on stage the award-winning speaker and internationally recognized leader in creativity and innovation, James Taylor, for what promises to be a truly thought-provoking keynote address.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good to see all your happy, smiling faces. I am the person that stands between you and some very good Belgian beer. But hopefully I'm going to inspire you in the next 45 minutes or so. I'm going to be talking to you about this idea of super creativity, which is about augmenting our human curiosity with different technologies. But really what I'm going to be talking to you about is collaboration today. Now, before we get started, let me take you here to Stockholm in Sweden. Fantastic country, Sweden. Stockholm, amazing place. There are two things that you should do when you ever visit the city of Stockholm. The first thing you absolutely must do is to go to the ABBA Museum, because you get to dress up like Benny and Bjorn. Money, 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 dance around. But the second thing I suggest you do is to go to the Nobel Prize Museum. The Nobel Prize Museum celebrates the greatest thinkers and innovators in history. One of the exhibits that you'll find there is for this man. His name is Professor Linus Pauling. He actually won 2 Nobel Prizes and was one of the founders in the field of quantum mechanics and molecular biology. Now, something you'll notice a little bit unusual about his exhibit at the Nobel Prize. It's this thing here. It's a hat, a French beret. See, Professor Pauling always kept this hat, this beret, on his desk. This was to remind him that even though he was a man of science, of data, of reason, he was also someone with a creative, curious mind. And it's that combination of the creative and the curious and the analytical that we're going to explore today. You know, to make big changes in any industry requires what the Italians would call curiosità, curiosity. The willingness to always be asking questions, sometimes deep questions. Great, creative, curious minds like the great Leonardo, for example. This one, Leonardo da Vinci, a scientist, an engineer, an artist, someone that was always asking questions, always pushing at the barriers of his industry. In fact, the other day, Julia Sweet, who's the CEO of Accenture, was asked what 2 skills does she look for in new hires for her executives. And she said, I look for 2 things. I look for their leadership skills, their leadership ability, but I also look for the sense of curiosity, always willing to be asked questions. Now, we need creative, curious thinkers today more than any other time in history. COVID-19 changed how we think about our lives and our work. But really what it did is it just fast-forwarded us into a new future. This new future is being defined by what we call the 3 Ds of deglobalization, digitization, and decarbonization. You know, you and I have lived through this pretty incredible time in human history. This 50-year period from the 1970s until relatively recently, we saw this incredible time of globalization. It took hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It made the world a more innovative and connected place. But it also made it more vulnerable. For example, if you ever remember this, 2021, the ship getting in the Suez Canal showed us the fragility of our supply chains, although it also gave us some pretty funny internet memes in the process. And as we were just hearing there, perhaps the biggest challenge that we face today is around how we respond to decarbonization, ESG reporting, the climate crisis. This will require that we get curious. You know, you can't create solutions from the same mindset that you created them from. We need to think differently. And exponential technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics are changing the world that we live in today. In fact, the University of Oxford did a study recently, and they found that they believe that nearly 50% of jobs will disappear over the next few years because of some of these technologies. Only 2 weeks ago, Goldman Sachs published a report saying that they expect nearly 300 million jobs will either disappear or be radically transformed by these technologies. Now, there'll be many, many good things that will come from this time. We were just hearing about DLT, we were hearing about these other areas, metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality. In this digital world, we'll see the blending of our physical and digital identities. We will create products and services that we can't even imagine right now. This is a really amazing time to be alive. Now, that's not to say that I'm not suspicious in certain ways. You know, every week it feels like another AI professor or a journalist or some government kind of talks about the threats that we will have. And they do pose threats from data security, financial systems, for our very democracy. But these technologies will challenge all of us. The other day I was speaking in Alula, which is in Saudi Arabia, a beautiful place, UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I was speaking, they brought this event together. They brought 100 innovators from the world of finance, entertainment, music, literature, all different areas. They brought us together. And I was speaking at this event alongside Ada. Ada is the world's first ultra-realistic artist robot. Ada creates beautiful paintings, does amazing poetry, based upon the knowledge that she's generated through her systems, through what she sees through the cameras in her eyes, what she hears through the microphones in her ears. So next year, when you come to this collateral event, it may not be a lowly human being like myself speaking at this event. I'll be replaced by a machine as well. But what I think is more likely is we will see these technologies as a way to augment the curiosity that we were born with. So what can you do to not just survive, but to thrive in this new age? There is one set of skills, perhaps more than any other, that we need to develop in ourselves, in our teams, in our organizations, to take advantage of this time that we're going into. Now, here's the good news. Every single person in this room today already has these skills. My job today is to show you how you can develop them. And these skills are around creative collaboration. And don't just take it from me. According to a recent study by LinkedIn, creativity is now the #1 soft skill that employers are looking for today, while collaboration is #3. And it's that combination of our creativity and curiosity and our ability to collaborate with both people and machines that will define the future. See, creativity is just about bringing new ideas to the mind. Innovation is about bringing new ideas to the world. But without creativity, there is no innovation. Creativity is the engine of innovation. As Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, a great AI pioneer, once said, he was asked, what should we be doing now in this time? He said, don't bother trying to compete with a machine on something that's going to do better, faster, and cheaper than you. You need to focus on developing that one skill that's most needed for this time. Our creativity, our curiosity. Now, this is me. I was brought up in the Highlands of Scotland, a country of golf, castles, whiskey, the movie Braveheart. As a child, my parents would make me walk up the summits of the mountains near where we lived, but they would make me walk up them dressed in a kilt. So for the uninitiated, a kilt is a traditional dress or a skirt that a Scotsman wears. I won't say what you do or don't wear underneath it. So imagine for a moment walking up these huge mountains in the rain and the wind and the snow while wearing a skirt. My parents thought it would build character and resilience in me. The reason I tell you this story is you can think of all these changes that we're seeing just now like a landscape that's slowly being flooded. But this is a landscape of human skills or competences. In the lowlands, we have skills like arithmetic, memorization. In the foothills, you have skills like logic, chess playing. And in the high mountain peaks, we have skills like emotional intelligence, critical thinking. Now, what happened 50 years ago was the first wave of automation came through, drowned out the lowlands, took away lots of blue-collar jobs, but left most of us okay. But today, this flood is reaching the foothills. And every person in this room is going to have to contemplate trying to get to higher ground. Creativity lies at the peak of this mountain, above all the flooded plains and foothills. In fact, if you want your organization to be the most innovative in its field, it's much more likely to happen when you invest in the creativity of your people. Those companies invest in the creativity of the people, have high levels of innovation in them, they're more competitive, they have better scores from their clients and their customers. In fact, you're also starting to see a generational change happen here. Most Gen Zs, Zoomers, Millennials want to work for companies where they can do their most creative work for good. And they also want to be seen as creative. In fact, we're seeing this change just going on now, this younger generation coming to the workforce, much more comfortable in using the word creativity, even if they sometimes actually mean innovation. But we have a problem. Most people in the world today do not consider themselves to be creative. In fact, let me have a quick show of hands here just now. Put your hand up. How many people in this room consider yourselves to be creative? Let's have a look at this hand. Okay, fantastic. So it's good. We have about 50%. So the studies show us that around 60% of people, when asked, would say they are not creative. It varies depending on the countries a little bit, but it's pretty much that number. So think about that for a moment. That means the majority of people do not consider themselves to have the one skill most needed to survive and thrive in this new time. They recently found a study that found IQ levels around the world have been going up for many years, but creativity levels have actually been going down. Time magazine calls it the creativity crisis. So what's going on? Why do most people today either not consider themselves to be creative, or if they do consider themselves to be creative, they're not doing anything to develop this skill? Well, the reason is we've taught ourselves myths as adults that's holding us back from doing our most creative and therefore our most innovative work. And we're going to dispel some of these myths just now. So the first myth is the myth of the creative type. This is the myth that says there are creative people and there are uncreative people. You're either born creative or you're not. Nothing can be further from the truth. There is no such thing as a creativity gene. Creativity is not passed on like eye color or hair color. A better way of thinking about your creativity is on a continuum with small c creativity at one side, big C creativity at the other. Small c creativity is when you do those things in your life and your work, which is new, novel, and useful. New, novel, and useful. Big C creativity, on the other hand, is when you do those things which in your work which are new, novel, and useful, and they change the field or the industry or the domain in which you work. So let me give you an example. I'm a big fan of TikTok. I love TikTok videos. There's always lots of examples of small c creative things. Kind of useful little things. In this case, never having to put a coin in a tray before when you go to a supermarket. But it's unlikely to change the pest control. It's unlikely to change the supermarket industry in any particular way. But what we're always trying to do is to move towards these, what we call bigger C creative work. Work which is new, novel, and useful and changes the domain. Daniel Kahneman, changing the way that we think about how the brain works. Zaha Hadid, the queen of the curve, did work which was new, novel, and useful and changed the world of architecture. Elon Musk, changing the world of travel. Django Reinhardt from here in Belgium, changed the world of music and jazz. But what all creativity researchers do agree on is that we're all creative. What we're always trying to do is push ourselves towards this bigger C creative work. The second myth is that you can't train or teach creativity. I could have measured all of your creativity levels this morning when you came in using something called the Torrance test. I could show you a couple of little tools, techniques that you can use, and I could measure your creativity levels again. I'll actually see your creativity levels go up. So when I work with companies, I actually help their people unlock the creativity of their people in order to drive innovation. So creativity is teachable. Creativity is trainable. It's like learning a language, for example. But the biggest myth that's holding you back from doing your most creative and therefore your most innovative work in the work that you do is what we call the myth of the lone creative genius. This is the myth that says that creativity is purely an individual pursuit. Nothing could be further from the truth. For the first 20 years of my working career, I used to manage the career of high-profile rock stars. So I worked with members of the Rolling Stones, multiple Grammy Award winners. Sometimes I'd be standing there at the side of the stage watching my artists perform. I mean, you deal with traders every day. If you think there's some big egos in your industry, try working in the music industry for a little bit. And I would stand there at the side of the stage watching my artists. I could see the spotlight on them. If I looked to my left, I could see the thousands, the tens of thousands of people in the audience enjoying the show. But if I looked to my right, I could see backstage and behind the scenes. Now, you as an audience member can usually only ever see the singer with the spotlight on them. You rarely get a chance to see the 100, the 200 people backstage who are just as much a part of making a creative and successful and innovative show as the person with the spotlight on them. See, the media loves the idea of the lone creative genius. The person with the spotlight on them, or the CEO on the front cover of that business magazine, as if that CEO had single-handedly built that business. But you know it's a lie. It's a fiction. Because here's the thing. Creativity is collaborative. Creativity is a team sport. And there are 3 keys if we want to unlock the creative and the collaborative abilities of our people and our organizations. I'm going to give you these keys today. The first key is what we call human plus human creative collaboration, sometimes referred to as creative peers. For example, often you will find in the most innovative organizations, they're really just combinations of lots of creative pairings. 2 different but complementary individuals who are willing to work together to help stress test and improve each other's ideas. From your world of finance, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, Lennon and McCartney, Jay-Z and Beyonce. I mentioned at the start Professor Linus Pauling. He won 2 Nobel Prizes. Many people believe his second Nobel Prize should have been jointly awarded to him and his wife, Ava. Such was her contribution. We sometimes refer to these people as hidden figures. The person in that creative pairing who sits behind, who hides behind. The other day I was doing an event with Steve Wozniak, with Woz, who's the co-founder of Apple. And Woz and I were talking about his creative collaboration that he had with Steve Jobs. Wozniak was the shy engineer, backstage and behind the scenes, while Jobs was the master marketer and deal maker. But Apple would have never become Apple if you didn't have this powerful combination. And you're going to have multiple creative pairings over the course of your careers. The first creative pairing in Apple came from Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. That took them to their first billion. But the first $1 trillion came from the creative pairing of Jony Ive and Steve Jobs. The next trillion, and that was about product innovation, but the next $1 trillion came from the relationship of Tim Cook and Steve Jobs. And that really was about supply chain innovation. In fact, if any of you watch the movie Billions, you see that character, that main character, Bobby Axelrod. He has these 2 key creative pairings in his work. The first is with his chief operating officer, Wags. Wags is his consigliere. Wags is a person that asks him kind of difficult questions, kind of helps him stress test his ideas. But the psychologist that's there, her job is slightly different. Her job is to help sometimes break him out of thinking that he's been kind of stuck in, to push him a little bit further than he would have necessarily gone on his own. But both of these creative pairings use questions, use curiosity to get to where they were. Without these creative pairings, he wouldn't be as good a leader or a money manager. And sometimes, though, these creative pairings need to have a bit of a competitive nature in them. The other day, I was talking to Sebastian Mallaby, who wrote a great book called The Power Law, which is about the history of venture capital funding in America. And in that book, he describes that many of the great VC firms in the world are really just collections of creative pairings. So like Sequoia Capital, for example. Doug Leone, Mike Moritz. Doug Leone excelled at operations, while Moritz was a brilliant strategist. Their role with each other was to stress test each other's ideas. So let me ask you just now, think for yourself. Who is that person that's the creative pairing in your work that you do? Who is that person that you go to with your ideas, who helps you develop your ideas, who stress tests your ideas, who pushes back sometimes your ideas, makes your ideas better? If you haven't already got that person, maybe your task here is to find someone like that that can be part of your creative pairing. And the second key, though, to improving creative collaboration is what we call human to the power of X, or collaborative teams. Now, there are many ways to drive innovation in an organization, and I'm just going to share 3 very short ones with you just now. The first is this idea of what we call incremental innovation. I'm a cyclist. These are my cycling buddies. Most weekends, you'll find us cycling around the hills and the mountains of my native Scotland. And the world of professional cycling changed one day in 2003. You see, up until that point, the British cycle team had never won the Tour de France. It only won 1 gold medal in the Olympic Games. Basically, the British, we weren't very good cyclists up until that point. But they brought in a guy called Dave Brailsford to change all of that. He then had such a success that a few years later, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, his team won 7 out of 10 gold medals available in track cycling, and then repeated that success 4 years later in London. So what did they do? How did they go from being nowhere to winning all the medals? Well, they applied a theory that's going to be very familiar to all of you in finance, which is called the aggregation of marginal gains. They gambled that if they could break down everything they could think of that goes into competing, in this case on a bike, and improved each element by just 1%, they would achieve a significant aggregated increase in performance. They said, let's forget about perfection, let's focus on progression and compound the improvements. So first we start with the big things. Okay, how can we make the bike 1% lighter this month, 1% stronger, 1% more resilient? Then they move to the athletes. How can we increase the power output of that cyclist by 1% this month, 1% the month after? They even took their own mattresses and pillows onto the tour so the cyclists could sleep in the same posture every night, thereby improving their recovery rates. They looked for small improvements everywhere, and they found countless opportunities for innovation. Every few weeks, the teams would come together to collaborate, to generate these ideas for finding these 1% gains. It became like a game for the whole organization. How can we shave 1% off the weight of the bike this week? How can we improve the amount of power the cyclist outputs by 1% this week? Everyone, from the cyclists to the physios to the mechanics to the coaches to the suppliers, looked for opportunities for these 1% gains, and it made them unstoppable. But sometimes we need to move beyond just incremental innovation to what we call radical innovation. Radical innovation is where we kind of go back to that sheet of paper again. For example, sometimes this doesn't mean reinventing the wheel, but what about if we kind of rethink things a little bit? So for example, this is a company. They realized that in cycling, for example, one of the things that causes friction is the 8 points of sliding friction as the chain disengages and engages across that. So they completely said, let's get rid of the idea of the chain completely. They developed a new technology they called ceramic speed in Denmark, which is 46% more efficient than the kind of cycles that you have with a chain. So you see, it's possible, even in those areas, those industries that people thought was only possible for incremental innovation, it is always possible to have radical forms of innovation. Now, to do this type of thing, we have to create what my friend and Harvard professor calls psychological safety in the organization. Because it's not good enough just having tools and process. We actually need to create a culture where innovation and creativity is valued. See, psychological safety is simply the shared belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with your ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So how do we do that in an organization, especially an organization that has a lot of regulatory situation? Well, one example is with a company called Adobe. Adobe has these things. They're called kickboxes. Just a very simple red cardboard box, sealed by a fire alarm graphic that says, pull in case an idea. Inside the box, you'll find Post-it notes, pens, a notebook for bad ideas, because we need bad ideas to get good ideas. And there's one more thing, a $1,000 prepaid debit card that the team can spend however they want without ever having to justify the purchase to a manager. For the price of funding a single $1 million project, Adobe was able to get its people to generate 1,000 new ideas to grow the business and reduce costs. The CEO of Adobe said, we only needed one of these ideas to work for the whole thing to pay for itself. It's been such a success that today, companies like Procter & Gamble, Cisco, the Bill Gates Foundation use this type of technique. Anytime a team spots an opportunity, a way to make things more efficient or better, or to find a new revenue stream, they ask for one of these boxes. They generate these ideas from it. Now, a few of these boxes are then, the 1,000 boxes are then given to the executive team, and a few are then given blue boxes. Now, Adobe won't say what is in the blue boxes, but essentially it's additional resources so they can build out from that prototype. But today, 26 blue boxes have come from the 1,000 red boxes. But what it does in the organization is it creates that culture of psychological safety. That everyone, no matter their job title, their seniority, has the ability to have some impact upon the innovation of that organization. And the third and final key to unlocking this kind of creative collaboration is what we call human plus machine creative collaboration, sometimes referred to as SuperCreativity. This is the ability for you to augment the skills that you have with exponential technologies like AI, for example. We call these hybrid collaboration systems centaurs, after the half-man, half-beast creatures of ancient Greek mythology. If you want a more modern example of this, have you ever seen the movie Iron Man, where you have the Tony Stark character, played by Robert Downey Jr., and he has an AI assistant called Jarvis. And together, Tony, the human, and Jarvis, the machine, they create and they build these amazing things. But today, this isn't a fantasy or a fiction. Today, this is a reality. In the world of chess, centaur chess players exist. A centaur chess player is just a human chess player paired and working alongside an AI. Now, here's the thing about centaurs, or a centaur chess player in this case. It will beat the strongest human chess player any day of the week. But it will also be an artificial intelligence working on its own. That's because centaurs combine our ability as humans to be curious, to be creative, to take strange turns, to ask questions with a machine's ability to be tactical and crunch huge amounts of data. Human plus machine creative collaboration. Because as humans, we're makers and creators of things, of products and services, companies and countries. It used to be the case in the past that ideas had to be purely generated and developed by us, the humans. But today, we can collaborate with machines to do so many amazing things. For example, one of my clients, IKEA, let's say they want to design a chair. They can say to an AI, okay, I want you to design me some chairs. I want it to support this much weight. I want it to cost this much. I want it to weigh this much. I want it to be made from these sustainable materials. The AI will then create thousands of different designs based upon the criteria that you select. Now, some of these designs here can look pretty weird, pretty wacky, but they conform to all the criteria you've selected. Yesterday, I came here on an Airbus. Many of the component parts now made on these planes are made using this human plus machine creativity. The human decides what they want to do. The AI does the first draft or the first pass. The human teams then come back into it, build out that prototype, and the final design is stronger, more lightweight, and more durable than the kind of thing that a human could have created on their own. Super creativity at work. And probably by the end of this month, in May, we're going to start to see another type of augmentation start to happen. Apple will hopefully launch its new glasses. They will be augmented reality. They will have a heads-up display unit like a fighter pilot would have. This provides the user with live data on whatever or whoever they're looking at. It means that when you come to this event next year wearing glasses like these, as you're walking around, I can instantaneously say, who is this person? What is their job title? Have we done business together with them before? You know, this will enable engineers, for example, already to walk around buildings getting live data on anything they're looking at. It allows that person that's working in a bank, that teller, as people are coming in, to automatically recognize, this person is a customer with us already. This person doesn't have this product at the moment. Very soon, all of us will be augmented in this way. And this type of augmentation will change the very workspaces that we work in. We will start to see the augmentations of our physical environments as they provide a new way, a new layer on our physical environments. And that barrier between in-person, virtual, and virtual is going to start to begin to blur. Now, for many of you, I know, you look at technologies like with ChatGPT with both awe and a bit of concern. What's going to happen? How are these things going to start to affect us? For me, I believe the best way of looking at any of these type of generative AI technologies is a new type of collaborator. Now, the skill is going to be in being able to decide which AI system you use for which purpose and how you want to do that. I believe that these actual AIs will help augment our human curiosity. Your job may not be replaced by an AI, but it will almost certainly be replaced by a human collaborating with an AI. We're seeing this all the time in every area just now. These tools, the way to think about them, if you want another way of thinking about them, is think about them like a newly minted person that's just come out of university. Really smart. They've got all the knowledge, all the theory in their head, but they lack what my grandfather would have called street smarts. If you've ever played with any of these systems, you already know that they hallucinate. They sound very right, but they're actually very, very wrong. So for you, your skill is being able to augment your street smarts. Augment that sense like, this doesn't feel right, there's something not quite right. That's you. That's the human in this. And in the world of banking, this kind of world of generative AI has been happening for many years now. Many of my banking clients use things like augmented coding, because many of the codes that your banks were built on were written 10, 20, 30 years ago. The newer coders that are coming in don't write in that code anymore. So things like augmented coding allow that engineer that's coming in to very quickly parse that information and figure out what they're actually looking at. Today, at companies like Microsoft's GitHub, around 40% of the code that's being written is being written by the AIs now. This allows the human coder to focus on those higher quality, those more complex tasks. In fact, I'm going to let you into a little bit of a secret just now. Even this keynote today uses a type of super creativity, of human plus machine creativity. Before I ever step in front of an audience or ever step in front of a prospective client, I use an artificial intelligence to analyze the people in the room or the person I'm going to go and have a conversation with. Because many of you are very skilled at being in meetings, and you know one of the things that you want to know, you know their biography, you can find that on LinkedIn, you can read some articles that they've written, but really what you want to know is how did this person think? What is their hot buttons? What's going to make them make that decision that I want them to make? So today, this is very, very easy to use with AI. All you need is 1,000 words spoken or written to understand the psychometrics of that person. And this is public information. So for example, the other day I was having to give a presentation. It was actually just a kind of conversation, a sales conversation with a CEO in New York. I'd never met this CEO. But we had an email correspondence, and along with that and an article that he'd written, I gave this to the AI. The AI immediately is able to create for me the psychometric map of this individual that I'm trying to persuade in the room. So I can immediately see here, this is someone that values practicality very highly. So I'm going to use more practical examples in my presentation to him. I can see he's authority challenging. So my posture in that meeting is going to be a bit more of a contrarian, because I know he's going to push back a little bit. I can also see he values trust very highly, 99%. So for someone like this, I'm going to use more social proof, more case studies, more happy customer success stories. And then what I can do is I can even give the AI my draft presentation, my keynote, for example. And then when I overlay the psychometrics of the person or persons in the room with the psychometrics of my presentation, I can immediately see the gaps. So in this case, I could see that I scored lower on levels of gregariousness than this person I'm going to be presenting to. This is obviously a New York CEO. Big, bold, maybe a little bit brash. I'm British. I'm a little bit more reserved. So I'm going to amplify this up a little bit more. Now, the AI is not going to write your next presentation or your keynote for you, but it will make you a better presenter of your ideas. For the person that's sitting on the other side, it's going to feel like magic. It's going to feel like, wow, this person really understands me. But it's not magic, as we were hearing earlier, it's data. Why shouldn't everyone in this room not be able to use tools like this to be able to augment them in the work that they do? And if you go to my LinkedIn profile, there's an article exactly on how all this stuff works. I find this amazing. What an incredible time we're living in history. Imagine the kinds of products and services that you can create when you can augment that creativity, that curiosity you were born with these exponential technologies. But in order to do this, we need to do things differently, and we need to do different things. When clients bring me in to help their teams, their people, unlock their creative potential, to drive innovation and to adapt to change, I share with them a number of different tools and techniques in order to create that common language, that culture of innovation in that business. My clients come from all different types of industries, including your industry, retail, banking, all different kinds of areas. But one of the things that's very common is I'll often go in and I'll talk about these 6 levers that we can use to unlock creative collaboration in the organization. In the final few moments that I've got just now, I'm just going to share 2 of these with you that you can immediately start to use this week to really bring out that creativity, that innovativeness in the work that you do. So there's 2 areas, 2 levers that we can look at. One is the process, which is how you and your team generate and develop ideas, and also place, which is where your people and team generate and develop ideas. So these are 2 levers I'm going to share with you just now. So the first thing is about this idea of process. Only 16% of your creative ideas are ever going to happen when you're sitting at your desk. Most ideas don't happen. That is why events like this are so important, because we come together with our peers to debate, discuss, challenge each other's ideas. We have to get away from our desks sometimes. In fact, recent studies from the University of Berlin and the University of British Columbia have found that the best color to have around you if you're looking to generate ideas is the color green. It's one of the reasons why you'll often get your best ideas when you're out in nature, when that color is all around you. It's the reason that many of my clients now are redesigning some of their workspaces to have more of that green, more plants, where companies like Google or Meta have more walk and talk meetings, for example, outside. There's something about this color green that activates that part of your brain. Now, most ideas will happen during low-level physical activity, or some of you will get some of your best ideas during low-level physical activity. Let me see a quick show of hands here. How many people get their best ideas in the morning or maybe in the shower before they go to work? Let me take a quick look. Okay, hopefully not together. How many people get their best ideas in the afternoon? Okay, not so many. And how many people get their best ideas, or ideas come easiest to them in the evenings, perhaps the wee small hours? Okay, thank you. So what's going on there, often for those morning people, is you've been doing what we call, West Point Military Academy, we call preloading. Preloading is the technique where about 2 hours before you go to sleep at night, you start thinking about a common problem or something you want to try and solve. Now, in the morning, what happens is your brain is fuzzy, it's unwound. You're open to unconventional thoughts. Alpha waves are rippling through your brain, directing your attention inwards to remote associations that emanate from the right hemisphere. Also, the part of the brain that says, that's a stupid idea, that hasn't woken up yet, which is quite good. So this is how we use it. Thomas Edison, the great inventor, said, never go to sleep without a request to your subconscious. Never go to sleep without a request to your subconscious. So what I encourage you to do is start getting into the habit of 2 hours before you go to sleep at night, start asking yourself open-ended questions. What's that one thing that we can do to increase revenues in this part of our business? What is that one thing I can do to improve the relationship with my son and my daughter? Your brain will incubate all of this overnight, and very often those ideas are going to be more flowing to you in the morning. Now, insights, ideas can't be forced. Caffeine can be very useful, sometimes in the creative process, but sometimes it could be detrimental. In fact, Martha Farrar, who's a neuroscience professor at the University of Pennsylvania, did a study recently, and she found that high levels of caffeine, coffee in your diet will reduce the number of ideas that you generate. So there's nothing wrong with caffeine. It's good for different points of the creative process. The other day, I was doing an event, and I was talking with John Cleese, so John Cleese from the Monty Python, and we were talking about his idea about creativity, where sometimes you want to be really focused in your creativity, really focus on what you're trying to do. Other times you want to defocus your thinking, defocus your brain a little bit. Now, caffeine is a focusing tool, which is great, but sometimes you just need to defocus your brain a little bit. Think more expansively, dial down the caffeine a little bit. When I came here yesterday on the plane, there was a woman sitting across the corridor from me, and she said, what do you do? And I said, I go around the world working with multinational companies, talking about how to unlock the creativity of their people and adapt to change like AI. And she said, oh, that's great. She said, our company, we're really creative. We do brainstorming sessions in our company. I said, great, fantastic, great. Brainstorming, first developed in the 1950s, great idea. Unfortunately, most companies get it wrong. Invariably, what happens is you get into, actually, you don't even know why you're going to a brainstorming session. It's just on the calendar. You go in there, there's one man, it's usually a man, holding the one whiteboard pen in the room, and it's his ideas that end up dominating the board. So we need to get rid of that. Some people don't think very well spur of the moment. So everyone should be told in advance, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Everyone, when you come into the room, everyone should be given Post-it notes, pens. No one should be allowed to dominate the board. Bring the facilitator if you can. But if there's one tip that I can give you today that will dramatically improve the quality of any brainstorming sessions that you do from now on, is one that I first thought of after reading something by the great management theorist Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker once said the most common source of mistakes in management decisions is the emphasis on finding the right answer rather than asking the right question. See, what we often do going into a brainstorming session is we look to immediately generate solutions. When all the studies show us, the best thing you could possibly do is spend that first 10 minutes of any brainstorming session simply generating questions. MIT, we call it question bursts. So in fact, Albert Einstein was once asked the question, if you had an hour to solve a problem, how would you use that hour? He said, I would spend the first 55 minutes thinking about what the question should be. And I could solve the problem very quickly. Because often, when you do this, what you will find is the problem you thought was the problem is not the main problem. There's something that lies behind that. So spend that first 10 minutes of any brainstorming session simply generating questions. Now, there are all different types of questions that we could ask. Why questions, who questions, what if questions. The big what does success look like? Because if you've got 5 people in the room, you're going to have 5 different ideas of what success looks like. You can even, I've been doing some things recently, we've even brought things like ChatGPT into the conversation and allowed it to start asking different types of questions that we may not have thought of. This will dramatically improve the quality of your brainstorming session. And the final one I mentioned is this idea of place. Place can have a big impact on your ability to innovate and to create. The Romans had an expression, it's called the genius loci. It's this idea that places themselves can have their own creative genius. There's places where you feel sparked, your ideas are sparked more. Now, very often we call these third places. A third place is somewhere that's not your desk, your usual workspace, but it's also not your home. It's a kind of middle place where we come together to debate, discuss, challenge each other's ideas. Very often you will see the use of circles in these spaces. For example, 2,500 years ago, you had symposiums. The word symposium just comes from the Greek word, which means to drink together. Because the Greeks weren't stupid. They knew that a little bit of alcohol was quite conducive to the creative process. So when you go for your beer tasting just after this, you're going to be doing something very Greek. I heartily approve of what you're going to be doing next. And during this event, this is where you come together to debate, discuss, and challenge each ideas. Ideas like democracy came from this event. Today, many of my clients, their third spaces are in virtual environments, something that's not your work, but not really your home. It's these kind of middle spaces where you have this. You know, for myself, one of my own creative spaces is this. This is Bemelman's Bar in the Carlisle Hotel on New York's Upper East Side. Every few months, my wife and I happen to be there. We go for some cocktails. We kind of brainstorm. We think of ideas. We write them on these little red bar napkins, because anything more than the size of a napkin is probably too complicated for me to do. So ask yourself, where are your third places? Where are those places that you go to get inspired? The ideas come to you more naturally. How much time are you spending in those spaces just now? Many of my clients today are completely reevaluating the use of their offices. Companies like Fab, First Abu Dhabi Bank, or the other day I was doing some stuff with Red Hat, which is now part of IBM. Because you don't need to go to an office anymore to do emails, to do documents. So what's the point of an office? So what many of them are doing are now turning their spaces into more creative collaboration spaces. In fact, this one here in Red Hat, North Carolina, they've even put a speakeasy in. You knew a little bit about the alcohol. Or other ones here from WL Gore, they're turning their office spaces more into spaces where they can bring their clients for kind of like storytelling, building the culture of the organization. Now, I want to contrast these creative collaborative spaces, these ideas of circles, with a room like this. This is the cabinet room at number 10 Downing Street. This is where the British Prime Minister makes his or her decisions, good or otherwise. Notice a couple of things. One big, long table. There is no live data anywhere in this room. A room like this is going to be great for lawyers. Lawyers love rooms like this. This is not a room for collaboration or for ideas. This is a room for command and control. If you look at some of the most creative spaces today, they will use this use of circles. CERN, Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. Bloomberg's new billion-dollar building in London, where they have these outside circles at the desk, and then they have the smaller inside circles as well. The other day I was in Dubai, the Sustainability Pavilion in Dubai, because here's the thing. If you want to think outside of the box, don't work in a box. Work in a circle instead. I'll leave you with a final story about this kind of move we're now seeing towards super creativity, human plus machine creative collaboration. The other day, there was a game, not a game of chess, it was a game of Go. And this game was between Lee Sedol from Korea, one of the world's greatest Go players, and Google's DeepMind, which is an artificial intelligence lab that's owned by Google. Now, if you don't know the game of Go, Go is a beautiful game, much more complicated than the game of chess. There are more potential moves in the game of Go than there are atoms in the universe. It's a beautiful game. But no one expected an AI to do well on a game as complex and as beautiful as the game of Go. But in those first few games, the AI kept winning. But in game 4, in move 78, Lee Sedol, the human, made a move that was so creative, so innovative, so inspired, that immediately took the whole game to a completely new level. Now, here's my question for you. Would Lee Sedol have ever made this move if he hadn't have been challenged by a machine? Today, we see the world's best Go players play game after game alongside AI, and we're seeing their world rankings skyrocket, because I believe these technologies will actually help us unlock something of our true human creative potential. In this room just now could be someone who's going to revolutionize your industry. That person could be sitting right next to you just now. That person could be you. And it starts by just getting comfortable and just saying, I'm creative, to embodying that creative ability that you have as a human. It's so beautiful. But the next stage is to augment that curiosity and creativity with collaboration with both other people and machines. So you can say, we are super creative. My name is James Taylor, and it's been my great pleasure speaking to you, and look forward to seeing you at the bar for some beer. Take care. Bye.